Your Space Coast vacation is preparing for liftoff. Start counting down now. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time for a beach vacay that feels like heaven. 6, 5, 4. Come explore Melbourne and the beaches. 3, 2, 1. It's time for some rocket-filled fun. Count down to your best beach vacation ever on Florida's Space Coast. Launch your planning now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
Selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
As easy as pie?
Sure. All you have to do is enter your license plate or VIN.
As easy as a stroll in the park.
Okay, then just answer a few questions and you'll get a real offer in seconds.
As easy as singing.
Why not? Schedule a pickup or drop off and Carvana will pay you that amount right on the spot.
As easy as playing guitar.
Actually, I find that kind of difficult. But selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
Can be.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get an instant offer today.
Welcome to the Wellness Transcription Podcast, the podcast that combines the power of Christian values with evidence-based nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle content. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Early. Join me each week as we explore the intersections of Christianity and wellness, offering you insights to help nourish your body, mind, and soul. Whether you're looking to improve your physical health or simply strengthen your personal relationship with Jesus, we've got you covered. Stay tuned for inspiring discussions, expert guest interviews, and practical tips to help you live the life God calls us to live. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Transcription Podcast. I have a good friend of mine on today who I think is going to provide some really cool insight into just issues that men deal with in Christianity. He's a good buddy of mine. We've come to know each other for a short period of time, but I feel like I've known him for 10 years. He's a great guy. Today I have Austin Ridge's men's pastor. His name's Brian Albrecht, and I just am happy to have you here, man. How are you?
Oh man, I'm doing great.
I've been, as soon as I met you, I'm like, this guy's personality. I've got to have this guy on because I've heard your name before you even came in as men's pastor of all the work you were doing at Cornerstone Restoration. So before we get into what we're going to talk about today, especially like in regards to like issues you deal with and things you see men struggle with in Christianity and come into that whole thing. Tell us about you. Where'd you grow up? How'd you get to Austin Ridge? What was that journey like for you?
Man. So I just turned 50 this year. You know what I'm saying? So that's a long story, but I'll say this. I'll start with, I grew up a little bit in Dallas, Texas. And then my dad actually became a pastor. And so between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, we moved up to Ocean City, New Jersey.
That's a long way from Dallas, Texas.
And it's, oh man, pretty crazy. So that not only was a shift in geography, it was very much a shift in my own soul. I felt like I was a very long way from home. And so that was really the transition for me from a spiritual standpoint to really be thinking deeper about life in general. And I made a lot of bad decisions along the way there in the first couple of years while I was there. So Ocean City is very unique. In fact, I just read in the New Yorker literally like a month ago. They had this biopic on this particular individual from Ocean City who grew up there in the 60s and 70s. I got there in the late 80s. And in this thing, they talked about how closed off people were within that particular town. And the reason that was true was because it was a resort town. So you'd have all these people coming in from Philly, all these people coming in from New York during the summer. And then the people that lived on, the 10, 15,000 that were actually there during the actual year, well, they had been there for generations. So there was no way to like get inside that sort of world. And particularly if you had a Southern draw. So anyways, coming into that environment was very tough. And I dealt with loneliness, honestly, like I had never, ever dealt with it before. I'm a relational guy. I like being around people, and not being around people and not knowing anybody was just way, way crazy. So I did the next best thing in my life, which is, got involved with a girl. I mean, that's the right thing to do, right? And that led me down a not great path. And by the end of that relationship, about a year and a half later, man, I was in the total pit. Man, I just had made every wrong decision a guy can make. And crying out kind of in my bed over a couple day period, I realized that what I'd been doing in my life in general and with her in particular was really bad. It's harming her, harming me. And I cried out to God. I was like, God, I need you to come save me. And to be honest, that's where I really met Jesus for the first time in my life. Like he literally came and saved me. He was there in the midst of all of my struggle and pain during that period of time. It was pretty brutal. And so that kind of got me on the right path. And so went to college. I was at Rutgers University, met my wife at Rutgers. She's absolutely phenomenal and a big part of why I'm here in Austin, why I'm ultimately here at Austin Ridge. But we met there. We actually got married right before our senior year of college, which was kind of unheard of. Well, people just don't get married that young these days.
100%. It's becoming few and far between. Like you see that happening, and I you hear that, and I've got friends that have gone to Baylor, and there's still some of that, like those Christian colleges where people are, their faith's right and everything is just lining up good. But I didn't meet my wife till I was in my second year of pharmacy school, and I was just like, I've just got to be patient, let the Lord work, and he did. So, yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. No, and it was weird even for us. I mean, our friends didn't know what to do with us. They're like, "Oh, you must be having sex all the time." So like, we're not even going to interact with you because like it was just a weird deal. But it was, I don't know that I recommend that for people, but it ended up working out well for us. Anyways, we went from there back to Dallas, and I went to seminary, went to school, ended up in the pastorate doing media related things. So I was in large churches who needed, production and communications and that sort of stuff. And so I helped to make all that stuff happen. And I actually learned about it at seminary, oddly enough. So they had a media arts program at the seminary I was at, and the head of that program was just freaking amazing and had contacts within the Dallas sort of film industry. So I got onto like the set of Barney.
Oh, that's
the set
cool.
of Wishbone back in the day.
Oh man, you were probably, that's crazy. I used to watch, I don't remember this. Obviously I was too young, but my mom said I watched that all the time.
So it was cool. The seminary was great for me, not only in getting some level of theological training, but also getting training in other areas. So I worked for a church in Irving, Texas, Irving Bible Church for a little while, and then ended up going to Hope Church up in Memphis. Did media direction there, creative direction, and then ended up being their executive pastor over a 19-year period. So, this is a big church sort of environment and a group of great professionals and great, just really wonderful people, and got to see just a lot of ministry in so many different areas. Anyways, at the end of that sort of period of time, and in alignment with sort of my career, my wife had gone back to work. The kids had gotten a little bit older, and she was in biotech world. And so she had jumped between a couple different companies, and she ended up at the company that she's at now. And she's hugely successful at it. She's just doing a great job. So, they were managing this one particular drug for a sort of orphan disease state, and it took off, went very well. She ended up in management and ended up in a program that was training her to continue to move up within the organization. And the bottom line is, during COVID, it was funny. She's a master at thinking through all the options. Like, I'm always just impressed by how she thinks strategically, but also creatively about things. So her world is obviously working with doctors, and her company was California based, and California based companies were very conservative, when it came to COVID. Like, we shut things down, you don't go. And she read the tea leaves. She's like, you know what? I mean, this was like March, right? 14th, 15th of that year was when COVID came out. And again, they had shut down through April immediately. Kathy looked at that and she goes, you know what? They're going to keep this thing shut down for a while. She's like, what's something that I might want to do? Because I'm going to be, it's not that she was doing less work, but her work was going to be more localized in the house. She's like, what's the thing that I've always wanted to do? And she's like, I always want to get my MBA. So she's like, she figured out a program. We were in Tennessee at the time, the UT of Tennessee.
That's my default. When I went to college in Memphis, and we've talked about this before when I was at CBU. So I'm actually familiar with Hope Church. I've got friends that still, I think, go there pretty consistently. So it's good, a good spot, but I don't remember where I was going with that. But
no, it's super cool. And to my wife's credit, she found a program that she could do online. So she didn't have to go to class, right? Because it was during COVID anyways. Schools were having to make those kind of calls. And so she did it. It was over an 18-month period. She finished getting her MBA from UT.
Again, that's where I was going with that.
And then
when people say UT down here, I still default like Tennessee. Like I did that to my boss the other day. We were talking. I was like, hey, I've got a guy I want you to meet. Like, he's a friend of mine. Me and him are involved in like a supplement thing. I've had him on the show a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to introduce him. And I'm like, yeah, he taught pharmacy at UT for like 20 years. And he's like, Texas, like where I went. And I'm like, no, sorry, that's Tennessee. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's the one I'm familiar with. So it's funny.
I know, it is so funny. And anyways, she got done. And she had gotten a promotion. And after that period of time, she got another promotion. And she came to me one day, and the promotion was going to require us to move. So she came to me one day and she said, hey, here's the deal. I know that you feel very comfortable. Like, I was in a great position and I loved what I was doing. I really did. Just loved what I was doing there, and had great relationships with just a lot of people just because of tenure, just the amount of time. And so she came up to me and she said, hey, I totally respect where you're at and all that, but I just want to let you know that if I don't make this particular move, I may not be able to have much more advancement within the world that I'm in. I mean, you got to kind of move when things are an option. So we sat back and we prayed about it and thought through it a bunch and got some good counsel from, I had two really good mentors and then a couple peer level guys around me. And we ended up making the call. Hey, you know what? I think this is it. So we picked up and we moved down here to Austin, Texas. A little bit later, we're both, I think, 48-ish at the time. So it's a little bit later in life, but I decided to jump on board and get on the ride with her. A lot of that decision too was, and I've done this a lot lately, is looking out 10 years down the road. A lot of my decisions lately had been 10-year down the road decisions. And that was a big part of the decision for me of moving at that point in my career. Cause there was a lot for me to give up. You know what I mean? I had a lot of, again, just relational capital with people. Like, they were good friends. Like, I care about them. And for good and bad reasons, they cared about me. And, you can't just, that's not something that just happens overnight. It's something that happens when people trust each other through time. And so you don't get that back, right? If you give that up, you don't get it back. And so it was very hard for me, but yeah, God's been good in the midst of all that. So it's been great. And I should say this, you brought up Cornerstone, and this is a very long-winded way of getting there. But one thing that I realized, I knew that the family was supposed to be moving down here, but I had no idea like what God's plan really was for me. And so fortunately, her company gave us a little bit of time for me to kind of look around for jobs. So there was a period of time where I was looking around at different things. And to make a very long story short, because I looked at some church positions and looked at some nonprofits via Joey Ryder here at Austin Ridge. He was my first sort of inroad into the Austin Ridge world. I didn't know anything about Austin Ridge at the time, but Joey fortunately was a LinkedIn guy, and I just shot, a message out, just said, hey man, can I talk to you about like what the landscape is? I was just looking for information and more for data, because I knew that they didn't have positions available or anything, but I knew that he was in the know about what the landscape looked like. And in the middle of the conversation, he was very kind. He goes, man, let me hand you off to somebody else. And he handed me off to TJ Morelli, who was running his own nonprofit at the time, but he was on the board of Cornerstone's nonprofit. And he was he was the main guy that was kind of the hiring manager they were looking for an executive director at that point. So that's how I ended up getting connected to Cornerstone. And of course, love what they're doing. I mean, that ministry is all about making connections with people in the community via people who have, vulnerable neighbors who really have just needs to take care of things in their home. And so that ability for that organization to come in, take care of those needs, knowing that what we're really trying to take care of is the needs that are deeply set in their heart. And it was just an incredible ministry, and it's just an incredible ministry now too. I mean, I actually right after this call, we got a board meeting. So I moved over to a board position after coming on Austin Ridge staff. And actually, the room that I'm in is where we're going to have a board meeting here in an hour. So, yeah,
Man, that's such a cool story. I mean, it's interesting how many inroads there are
It
with
is.
me and my wife's story. I mean, I never thought we'd end up in Austin, Texas. I went to, I went to pharmacy school. My dad taught pharmacy school at UAMS in Little Rock for 30 years. Obviously he wanted me to come there so he could teach me that kind of thing. And because of that connection, like I'd known a lot of people, and I was very involved in the community independent pharmacy setting there. I had connections. I had job opportunities when I was ready to graduate. And then my wife at the time,
Your Space Coast vacation is preparing for liftoff. Start counting down now. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time for a beach vacay that feels like heaven. 6, 5, 4. Come explore Melbourne and the beaches. 3, 2, 1. It's time for some rocket-filled fun. Countdown to your best beach vacation ever on Florida's Space Coast. Launch your planning now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
I think this is my fourth year of school when COVID started, because COVID hit us right in the perfect time for me because I was done with all my academia classes. It was just kind of rotational stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd had job opportunities and some other things pop up, and I was really dead set on staying in Little Rock. I'd just kind of gone through that whole testimony that I've shared with you before with my buddies, bringing me on to Bible study. We were getting involved at Fellowship Bible Church in Little Rock, and I was really feeling comfortable. And getting close to graduation, I'm studying for boards, and my wife goes, "Hey, I got a job offer today." I go, "Oh, awesome. Where?" I go, to Arkansas Children's, because that's where she had a lot of connections there too. But so I was prepping. I was really expecting her to come back, and she goes, "No, it's in Austin, Texas." And I'm like, "Austin, Texas? Like that's not close. Like, I don't mind. Austin sounds fun."
Yeah.
And I go, "Okay, well, what's the job look like?" She starts describing it, and I'm like, Before I tell you my opinion, are we going here? And she goes, "Yeah, we're going here pretty much." Like, I don't, we sat and talked about it. We prayed about it for a little bit, and we were just like, I was like, you know what? I have, really no reason to stay. It would be selfish for me to make her, come back here for a lesser opportunity, not necessarily a lesser opportunity, but like less money, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we moved down here. And then just found the Ridge. I literally was driving to the Ridge or past the Ridge one day to go to work. I was working with Walgreens at the time just to have something in transition before I found where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, Jess, this church looks familiar. Like, it looks like what we just kind of got our feet wet into." And she goes, "Okay, we'll check it out." Walked in there, heard Brad talk. I forget where we were at the time. I want to say we were in like John or something. It was a couple years ago. And I was like, this place is different. Like, this church is different. And coming from a Catholic background, and again, I tell people this all the time, I don't really have any problems with the Catholic Church in and of itself. Most of the problems I had with it were things that I wasn't doing. I wasn't seeking out community. I wasn't seeking out, how to be a better man. Like, I had all these questions, but no one to really go to. But being at the Ridge, you get hit with that immediately. Like, this is a family. There's so many opportunities we want you involved. Everyone's welcome.
Yes.
And it's just, it's different. When people are full of the Spirit, man, it just, everybody at the church, it's just like, it's alive, so to speak. And then I took a minute to get my family to kind of, hey, this isn't like a big mega church kind of thing. Like, that's not what it is. And I sent them a couple of the sermons, because still it was just kind of COVID time. So people started, we're watching stuff from home, and my parents were like, "Oh, this is cool. Like, we're not even there, and this is cool."
Yeah. Do they still live up in Little Rock?
So my parents moved to Oxford, Mississippi, in right before COVID started, which is impeccable timing for them, because they got into a house in Oxford. Interest rates were like at the lowest they could be. It couldn't have been perfect. And then after they got settled in Mississippi is when COVID kind of messed everything up.
Are they Ole Miss people?
No. So my dad does dietary supplement research. He's one of the world's experts. I'm comfortable saying this. He's one of the world's experts on herb-drug interactions, stuff like that. So my dad taught pharmacy, pharmacology, and pharmacokinetics, which is basically like the study of how drugs are metabolized and stuff. and absorbed all those good things. And he'd always done research on the side, grants, proposals, and this one group they're on Ole Miss's campus, but they're technically not like part of Ole Miss, even though they kind of are. It's called the National Center for Natural Products Research. So my dad, being the expert in his field, they would always collaborate, and they've been trying to get him over there for years. And my dad kind of got burnt out. He's like, let me get Pat through school, and then I'll probably see what happens. And so he just does research now over there. So they just picked up and moved. And I think it was great for them because there really wasn't, it was similar to your story. There wasn't much more room you could go, like as far as advancement goes. My dad was tenured. He'd been at the school for 30 years, but it was something, he was being pulled in that direction. Looking back at it now, I think God was really like, hey man, like you need to, like, this is where you need to be, whether you realize it or not. Yeah. And then right when he got to, right when COVID hit, he was out of that whole thing. So classes went virtual, everything started to go into like a recording type session. And my dad is not the best as far as technology goes. So it ended up working out because I think he would have gotten a lot more stressed out trying to still teach during that environment.
I mean, literally, did he give up a tenured position to go?
Yeah, he was a tenured professor. Like,
man,
and they made it worth his while. Like they were like, hey, like we know how good of a, we know your reputation. Like it was a good trade-off, but it was just kind of like, yep, this opportunity's progressing. I'm ready to make a change. It was very quick. So my last actual year of school with COVID in pharmacy school, I was staying with my mother-in-law. She was gracious enough to let me stay with her for a year when me and my wife were engaged. So I didn't have to take out extra money for rent. So she's a sweetheart. I love her to death.
Okay. Does she have a bunch of rules? Like, don't screw this up. And,
how do I say this? My mother-in-law, she's my wife are very similar as far as personality goes. They're super organized. They think through every option. Like you said, your wife does. Like I was always like, oh, this is the first thing that popped in my head. That makes sense. Let's just do that. And
makes sense.
Hers was, well, did you think about this situation and that? Blah, and I was just like a different way of thinking. So her mom was very quiet, but she has, rules and house things and stuff, but she was very laid back about it. Mm-hmm. My wife, it made living with my wife when we got married really easy because I kind of knew what to do and how to kind of navigate like the little things. Cause being newly married, I had no idea that the little things mattered as much as they did. And it all worked out.
Okay. So did you ever have like a conversation with your wife? Like, hey, I was talking to your mom about this and like, she didn't know anything about what you were talking about. Like, were you teaching her about her own? Oh,
that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that one. I'd have to think about that because I would say her and her mom are best friends. They talk all the time. So they're very similar. It's just their delivery is different. Jessie will let you know how she wants stuff done. And it's very like organized and to the T. Her mom's the same way, but again, it's just it's kind of more expected. Like I've told you a couple times, like, you know where I stand on this. Like you don't have to keep,
it's on you.
But no, it really helped me. I mean, I was not an organized person. I didn't have, I made smart decisions and did what I needed to do. But as far as really getting organized and on top of things, it was just like, oh, okay. And being married, that's, as a guy, like you want to take on all those responsibilities and you want to, when you see someone else doing it better than you, it's like, you gotta ask those questions. So Brian,
that's great.
Interesting journey that you've had to get to Austin Ridge. How did that men's pastor role come up? So like how when you were in that stage, how did Austin Ridge reach out to you about that?
Yeah. So I think, the two sides of it were one, my predecessor was shifting gears to become one of a campus pastor at a new site that Austin Ridge was in the process of creating. So he was clearly moving that direction. And then, so they had a role open. To be honest, it wasn't something that I honestly did not think about this at all until it had gotten around kind of nearer to about the year point in being a Cornerstone. And I had a series of days there was one month where I had a series of days that kind of ran like this. my morning would be spent doing sort of the responsibilities related to Cornerstone. And then I would go out and meet with one of the neighbors that we were reaching out to. And I would have these ministry moments where I'd be spending a good amount of time, hour, 90 minutes, either sharing the gospel or just trying to be Jesus to them. And then I would go to another appointment that was doing the same sort of thing. And what I realized is at the end of the day, the thing that where I was really drawing my energy was the interaction with these individual people. And there was a series of these events. And what I was just realizing is just that I felt like I was being called back to the church. Like, and again, back to the 10-year thing, like, just thinking through the next decade of my life, what are the things that I want to be a part of? And being engaged as a pastor in men's lives and women's lives as well too, but just being engaged as a pastor, I think is really what God's calling me to at this point in time. So I had that sort of growing in me. And then that men's pastoral role was there. And so there were a series of a couple conversations where we just went back and forth, just kind of thinking through it. What might this look like? And, am I the right guy for it? And that was true on both sides of the equation. And I think after we thought through it some, it felt like this was a good fit at this point in both Austin Ridge's, history and my own way.
I'm glad you're here. I still, for real. I mean, man, like I said, I knew, like, I'd heard your name pop up from when I was in my D group. Some of the guys that were at Cornerstone knew who you were, and they were like, "It's probably the guy that they're going to bring in."
Yeah.
And then when you came to Saturday morning Bible study with all of us, and you're just like, it was like I'd known you for years when we were talking about Memphis and stuff. I said, "This guy's cool."
Yeah.
This is very, very social. Everybody at the church. Like, it's not, that's one thing I respect about Austin Ridge in general is all the people that are in leadership there. It doesn't feel like they're not normal people. When you're talking to people, from a layman's perspective, when you're talking to someone who's higher up in the church that has more authority over decision making and stuff, you kind of tend to treat them different without realizing it. But it also urges everybody's just a normal person. We all have things that we struggle with, and y'all are very open and honest about that. And it allows people like me who struggle with similar things to really open up to y'all and feel that genuine community connection. And because I think that's key. I mean, I've made so many friends, genuine friendships at Austin Ridge in such a short period of time that, I mean, it just, I've never been in another environment where it's like that.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I've been one of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of what Austin Ridge is doing is the two things that you just talked about. One of it is the professionalism of the staff. I mean, the staff really they're professionals, and we have professional systems that we all abide by here. And we're not doing it because we're trying to be, business people. We do it because we want to stretch ourselves and be our best. So, and that was very apparent way before I was thinking about even being a part of it. Like, it was clear for everybody I was interacting with, the missions department and Joey and TJ and Jeff Moore, like everybody that I was interacting with was just that kind of person. But the flip side of all that is exactly what you just said, it's the genuineness. Like if you don't lead from the front, letting everybody know kind of where you're broken, people aren't going to know that you've really got, a compass to guide them with. Like, you gotta have some scars, some wounds, and some brokenness that's just part of the human condition. And we carry that with us through our entire lives. I mean, we're in the process right now, right? God's doing things in our life, making us better, making us more like Jesus, but the path is long, and we need other people alongside of us.
Yeah. Like I said, man, it's one of those things about church and stuff is I'll tell you this, cause you mentioned this already, that how you felt when you were my age or younger. So when you were in New Jersey, is that loneliness feeling. I felt that same way. I, wasn't a person who really, I've told you this before, I may not look the part, but like I was pretty shy growing up in most of my life. So it was very social scenes where people are out partying, doing stuff. Like, I can have conversations, but I'd rather be in a room with 5 people I care about and talking about stuff there. So being on my own, sports, pharmacy school, it was that loneliness was the thing that I really was like, man, this isn't fun. And, it was very hard. Like I have a few buddies of mine that like I can call when I need them. Like if I call, they'll pick up the phone. I have no doubt about it. But as time went on and life progresses, like those, you get further and further apart from people like that. And I was always seeking that community aspect of it, whether I realized it or not. And I was walking into Austin Ridge one morning, and this is when I met Brian Bailey, who leads the precepts group that we're a part of on Saturdays. And I was literally we're walking up the steps from the parking deck, and I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, look, I really like where we're at. I like where we're coming. I go, but I got work on me to do. I go, I don't read the Bible as much as I should. I finally want to. Like, I never had the desire to read it or want to in the past. And then once that transition happened, that started changing. And I was like, I don't know where to start. I have all these questions. I was like, I just need to get plugged in somehow. Like, Austin Ridge has got some opportunities. Like, I need to do it. It just like, you never know, man. Like, you never know when you find a group of people that are doing exactly what you need. And we walk down the path, and Brian looks at me.
Your Space Coast vacation is preparing for liftoff. Start counting down now. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time for a beach vacay that feels like heaven. 6, 5, 4. Come explore Melbourne and the beaches. 3, 2, 1. It's time for some rocket-filled fun. Countdown to your best beach vacation ever on Florida's Space Coast. Launch your planning now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
Selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
As easy as pie?
Sure. All you have to do is enter your license plate or VIN.
As easy as a stroll in the park.
Okay, then just answer a few questions and you'll get a real offer in seconds.
As easy as singing.
Why not? Schedule a pickup or drop off and Carvana will pay you that amount right on the spot.
As easy as playing guitar.
Actually, I find that kind of difficult. But selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
Can be.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get an instant offer today.
Never seen me in my life. And he goes, you come here. I'm like, okay, what's up? How are you, Patrick, whatever? He goes, what do you do Saturday morning? I go to work? I go to work at 9. He goes, great. We meet at 7. I'll see you on Saturday in building C.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, what am I getting myself into?
Love it.
And he goes, oh, we got a Bible study. There's homework. Like, you're going to be in the Word consistently. There's like a bunch of us guys from all stages of life. We're all doing the same thing. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, hey, I just had this conversation with my wife, and Jesse's like, see, I told you. And then, it just went from there, and it grew, and like, just that led into D groups, and that led into Wednesday night groups, and then I'm excited to work with you guys on Fridays coming up in January.
Yeah. Oh man, dude, I can't wait, dude. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Oh yeah,
thank you for being a part of it, Jeff.
I would say let's transition back into this topic. So let's say as your role as a men's pastor here, and what are some of the things, and again, I know some of these because I've interacted with people that go the Ridge, but when people come to you guys and they reach out to the department, they're like, hey, look, I'm a guy, I'm either, whether it be single, married, or whatever stage of life, what are some of the common themes do you see? What questions are being asked? Like, what are some of the things that jump out at you immediately? They're like, men are struggling with this in this community and we need to be aware of it.
Yeah. So, of course, the sort of top layer would be, whether they know Jesus or not. So obviously the first starting point is, what's at the center of their life. And so that's probably where the first stop is always about whether or not they've placed their faith and trust in Jesus really as their savior and also really as the Lord of their life. Because everything else that follows from that, like if you don't have Jesus, then it's not really going to be significant for the long term anyways. So I would say for those that are already sort of walking the walk, I think there's a couple things that sort of happen after that. One is, where is a guy's identity really coming from? That's a real big one I found. And what I mean by that is you could be a follower of Jesus, but obviously you can still struggle hugely with, is it more important for me to be, somebody who's known within the business field, or if I'm an attorney to be known as something? And where do you find your core identity from? Is it found in my walk, in my relationship with Jesus, or is it found in as sort of outward signs of success that people can kind of point to? So I think that's a really, really, really big one. That's a struggle. And then the other thing I would say too is for people, you can still be, again, walking with Christ, but still not know kind of why you're here, like what your mission is. So like you could be within whatever role God's called you to and not really be living according to the mission that God's given you, even within that world. So this is a place where I see a lot, particularly we're in an area where there is some wealth here, which a lot of times will equal men having a higher degree of leisure time. And so one of the things for me is always making sure that leisure time falls underneath the lordship of Jesus as well too. Everything that you do can be missional. So like, if you like to shoot, make it missional with the people that you're with. If you like to play golf, if you like to play a sport, if you like to ride a bike, that every aspect of who we are, sort of bridges that sacred and secular divide, that we can do these things, but also that there's a missional reason that's a part of what we do. And I would say this too, when guys get off of that mission, they get into trouble because they end up filling it with other things. So, and those are the things that we think of, whether it's, addiction to pornography or substances of any kind. That's where I think guys get off a lot, is because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So they fill their time up with things that they shouldn't be doing. That's overly simplistic. That's not a counselor speaking. That's not whatever, but that's what I note. And that's what I'm interacting with guys.
Yeah. Believe me, I relate to that 100% because I was one of those people. And how do I say this? I was diagnosed with ADD a long time ago when I was like a young kid. So I was always trouble sitting still, focusing, stuff like that. But as I got older, it became less of like an attention problem, more of if I don't like stack my calendar, if I'm not busy and I have too much downtime, that's when bad things creep in. And I've personally struggled with this whole thing, not so much now as that I'm at the Ridge, because even though there's days where I'm like, man, I'm on fire. Like I feel that mission and that drive. And then there's some days you're just like, I don't know how I made it through today. I didn't think about God. I didn't do any of that. I don't like that feeling. Yeah. And then you go to church and you hear about you start feeling sorry for yourself. Like, I've had a bad week and busy. You get to church, you get to a group of guys and they're all talking about their weeks. I'm like, man, my week was way better than that. And it's like, these guys are still on mission and focused, and it's very inspiring. Sometimes you just need that reorientation. But for me, all the things that I would say I struggled with significantly in the past, and some of the things you mentioned, it was always when it was leisure time, too much leisure time. Whether I could have been studying or doing a hobby or something that I was interested in, but instead I was sitting at home watching TV, and then the idle hands of the devil's workshop, so to speak. So. And it was one of those things where it's just like, I struggle with that too. Because as a man, it's like, especially now that I'm married and like me and my wife are talking about kids here in the future. So it's like how I have to be the example now in all aspects. And it's like, if my kids or my kids' friends look at me and can't tell if I'm a Jesus follower or not, then that's the biggest concern in my life. Like that's the thing that I really need to work on. It doesn't matter what title I have. I've got, I have a doctorate. Like I have all these fancy names and stuff. And but that doesn't, those are all gifts bestowed on me from our Creator. Like none of that am I doing, and if I'm not giving him credit for that, then my outlook's going to be different. And that's one thing I've really, really appreciated about guys at the Ridge, especially you and yourself. You'll listen to people's testimonies and be like, see, God's moving. Like, and it's just as men, all you need is that reminder, because when we live in our heads, we're just like, we start to kind of become the center of attention. And totally. And it's really good to have people that just reorient you on that train.
No, I was going to say, I mean, you're bringing up another major thing. I didn't even think to say this earlier, but men a lot of times when they struggle, end up in positions of isolation. They tend to move and be by themselves. and work independently. And of course, that's a bad place to be. And you've said this like 10 times, but it really is the orientation of everything that we do from a men's ministry standpoint. Men need community. I mean, men need community. They need a group of guys around them that shares the same faith and shares the same understanding that they are broken people that need other people around them that are going to help them succeed. And we got all the verses, the iron sharpens iron, and but it's fundamentally true. And our men's ministry is very much oriented that way. Like typically we've got 10 to 20 minutes worth of study, and then you've got 30 to 40 minutes where you're working out what you just studied into your lives. And so it's guys looking into each other's eyes and talking to each other, directly about how Jesus can grow in their life in whatever area that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I know that's part of what Precepts is all about too. It's just, again, you talk through all these, you spend the time in the Word, but then the other aspect of the Word is that it's applicational, right? It should be shifting and changing you because it's alive. It's living and active, right?
Yep.
Double-edged sword, right? And it cuts, and it should be cutting. And oftentimes, particularly within a group, we're the ones that get to be a part of that honing each other.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I mean, again, I think as men, I mean, me in particular, but especially guys I know that are close friends of mine that have struggled with way more difficult things, substance abuse, especially even in my field with medications and stuff like that. It's just, you see people just isolate, and they don't even think they may even intend to isolate. But as men, we just kind of tend to bottle stuff up, keep it to ourselves, and then hoping it goes away. And then when it doesn't, it blows up, and we don't really know how to express like why this is how it's all coming out. And it's tough.
Yep.
But I think one thing that's the most important thing that you said just a second ago was we're all on the same team as far as Jesus goes. And when you don't have to question, like I don't have to question anyone's genuineness. I don't have to, my testimony is just as uniquely unique as someone else's. But what can I learn from them? I think is the question I ask myself. I don't have all the answers by any means. But when you see people asking you questions like, hey man, like, what's this mean? You're married, blah, blah. And it's like, oh man, you're expecting me to have the answers?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's just cool because it's just these areas of topics that most men that like everyday guys, they don't want to talk about it. And we're vulnerable. We're open to it. And it's just, dude, it makes all the difference. Makes all the difference.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Man,
I love that.
Let's see. Well, I'm trying to think. Okay. I have another question. So I get asked this one a lot, and especially more from single guys. And I feel like I just want to get your opinion on this. They'll ask me, how'd you meet your wife? And tell them the whole story and everything. And then the next question out of their mouth is like, man, I want that. Like, how do I do it? What steps do I have to take? So as a married man yourself, how was that like? I know you got married at a lot younger age than I did, or not a lot younger age, but a younger time in your life. What were some of the things you were looking for in your wife that were non-negotiables? I'll let you go, and then I'll tell kind of how I approached it. But that's a big question I get. It's like, how do I find a wife that's on the same path as me? And like, how did all that work out?
Yeah. So again, my approach will probably be less mature than your approach because we got married so young and we didn't really know who we were. I was 21, she was 20. I mean, literally we had a couple of years where we had to figure out who we were. But the things that I would say was I got burned by that relationship that I talked about earlier. And one of the things that I did not want to do was repeat that. So I was like, you know what? From this point forward, I'm only going to date if I think there's a possibility that this could go somewhere. So that was definitely my modus operandi. I mean, that's the thing that I was working with first is don't date unless there's the potential for marriage. So that limits your field because you got to find you got to find somebody who shares that sort of viewpoint, right? I mean, and not everybody's dating for the sake of, some people are just going out to have fun. And I, of course, was looking for something more than that. So that was the first thing. My wife and I, it was kind of serendipitous. We ended up and you hear this all the time, right? Because I think love is all about this sort of thing. But we were in the same campus ministry together. We ended up sharing in our freshman year in college, we ended up getting to be good friends with the same friend group. So we were hanging out a lot. And she had initial interest in me. And I thought she was cute, but I was not super interested in, I don't know that I wasn't interested in anyone at that point, because it was new to college, and that just wasn't where my head was at the moment. But it took about a year's period of time for me, and we had gotten to be good friends over that period of time. So the cool thing about our relationship is it started off of friendship before it turned romantic. And the things that I probably appreciate about her, that I appreciated about her then, and I appreciate way more now that we're, I think, 29 years in a marriage, but they're the same thing. The first thing is definitely brutal honesty. By far, we try to put everything on the table all the time. And as you go through marriage, there are subjects that you curb on that, right? Because the friction points that you can create by being, overly honest. But we put everything on the table that's significant to our relationship. That's all out there on the table. That's the one thing. And the other thing I would say too is I am a very, we used to say type A personality. I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm a driver. I can tend to black and white things sometimes. And she is opposite of me in those things, except for the achiever. She could be on it too, but she is a great counterbalance to me. And part of that counterbalance is just like, hey, that's a great idea. Let me smash it by saying this, and then we'll rebuild it together. She's that sort of person. And the repercussion, or the thing that makes things cool about that, is it makes our relationship fun. And so I would say brutal honesty is one thing, but the other thing is just plain fun. And this is going to sound dumb, but I don't do fun naturally well. I tend to take things seriously. And so that's been the other key thing in our relationship. That's just been a big deal. Those have been the two things we've carried with us, our marriage. And those are the things that really hold us together, even when things are hard. Obviously we're committed to each other, and all the stuff, but those are the things that hold us together when things are difficult. It's brutal honesty, keep the honesty going. And then,
I tell my wife that all the time. Like, even the most minuscule detail thing that happened at work today, I'm like, hey, I wanted to let you know this happened. It's just like, what? It's not even that important. I'm just like, I have to tell you, I don't need to keep anything. Like, nothing's off the table, so to speak. I think for me, you've met the Braden and Tristan.
Yeah.
Those guys are just, they're on it.
Totally.
But they ask me questions about marriage stuff all the time. They're actively dating. And then Austin Ridge does a great job, I think, with singles, getting people together and just in communities.
Totally.
That's good. But they ask me all the time, like, Pat, what did you do? Like, what was that marriage story with you like? And I go, well, I'd kind of gone through college, and I didn't have that kind of partying. I wasn't into that kind of thing, but I dated, don't get me wrong, but like there was something in the back of my mind when I was either considering getting into a long-term relationship with someone, or we're kind of in that in between of, I just don't see a long-term thing here. And the thing I struggled the most with is I really didn't know how to articulate that well, or have a reason to like have that kind of thing. Cause everything may be clicking, you might like the same things, be on the same page with a lot of these other areas of life. And then some in the back of your mind is just like, man, this isn't your person. I'm like, okay. And I listened to it. I listened to that voice in my head, and it burned a lot of bridges. Like there were situations where I didn't have a good reason as to why. I would just say, I just don't think this is going to work out long-term. And so no closure really. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down. I sat down one day and I wrote out a list of like the 5 things I thought were the most important. Number 1 was I wanted her to be a believer. That was number 1. And then the other 4 were really kind of, we agree on the same things as far as like how we want to raise kids, like those types of things.
Yeah.
And then I think the third or fourth one was, I want someone who compliments me, because I by no means have it figured out. I do things wrong a lot of ways sometimes, but I want someone that understands me, but at the same time, it's different for me that compliments me in that way. We work together as a team. You're not you're not on separate teams when you're married. You're one. So like y'all gotta know your strengths and weaknesses. And I made that list, and I was like, okay, this is how I'm gonna date moving forward. Went to pharmacy school and dated a couple people that were in my class. Like, got to know them, and it was like, yep. Check off 2 or 3 of them, and then the other 2, I'm like, I'm not these. I'm not gonna divvy off these. And I met Jesse, and then it was just like, okay, she's checking all these boxes. We'd known each other. We were friends. We were in the same pharmacy fraternity kind of thing. We talked all the time. Really liked her, and I was like, I'm just gonna give him a shot. I'm gonna ask her out. Asked her out, shot me down. Just shot me down. I was like, okay, but what was interesting is we would still talk. We were still friends. Like there was that communication. We still talked all the time. And I was like, that's weird. If you didn't want to, if there wasn't something there, why are we still talking as much as we are? And so I was like, I'll play the friend game. We'll play this long game. We'll see how it goes. A few months go.
Yeah. Did she give you a
Yeah, she didn't tell me. She didn't tell me the reason until about after the second time I asked. So I asked her again, shot me down. I was like, okay, look, what's up? Like, we still talk all the time. You text me all the time. Like, we're going back and forth. Like, why won't you go out with me? And she goes, yeah, you're my professor's kid. I just think it's kind of weird. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, well, I've had your dad in class. Like, he talks about you before you got here. And it was just like a weird barrier. Like, I was like, I don't want to date the professor's kid. And I was just like,
and you're like,
yeah, right.
What about me?
Right. I was like, we get along. Everything's great. Like, it all works out. And she's like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. She goes, I see your point. She goes, I see your point. And I'm like, that's weird. And so I was like, all right, I'll give it more time. I still really like her. Like, we were still good friends. I was like, you know what? I'll give it one more shot. But after that, like, I don't think I'm going to try anymore. And I asked her one more time, and she was on a bachelorette trip with her friends in Nashville. They were out. I forget what they were doing. I think they were at dinner or something one night. And I'd messaged her. I was like, hey, come on, there's something here. I think we should at least see how this works out. And she was still kind of apprehensive. Yeah. One of her best friends goes, what are you doing? Like, we're not in grade school. Like, you can just go out with a guy. Like, it doesn't matter who his dad is, or if he teaches you in class. Like, let's just go. Worst case scenario, you go on a date, it doesn't work out, I'll water under the bridge. Yeah. And she's like, fine. And she finally said yes. And I'm like, I got it. Like, that was it. I knew if I just got in the door, I was going to make it work. Yeah. We went on our first date, and man, like, everything was clicking. Like, we got along just as much as we did. Conversation was fun. We talked about God, like, all that stuff. Big time conversations that, like, on the first, second date, those usually don't happen. And I was just like, I went home and my mom asked me how it went. And I'm like, I don't feel like I have on all these other ones. Something's different. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I was like, I need to pursue this further. And Jessie had a very similar reaction when her mom asked her, and it just fostered from there. It's been super easy. I didn't have to work really hard. I didn't have to really change a whole lot. Like, we all knew kind of what we each brought to the table, and we talked about it. That's another thing. Jessie is, I love her, but she is very good at letting me know how she feels about things. And that's great. Like, like I said, as a guy, I may only see one viewpoint. And when my wife, I think the biggest phrase, and I don't know if you use this one in your marriage, but this one I would have always thought was dumb when I was a kid or younger and immature. But when you say this, it makes me feel this way. That was the biggest thing for me. I was like, wait a minute, that sounds, wait, okay, hold on. And that thing has been the easiest as far as communication goes, because I'm not assuming anything. Like, I know exactly how you feel about that situation. Yeah. Whether I think it's a big deal or not. Yep. But man, having a person who you're on mission with, and I don't have to question, her faith or anything. Like, I don't have to worry about, is my faith walk going to hinder hers? That's it. If you can get that part down, you can make other stuff work. It is, as far as I'm concerned.
No, that's exactly. I totally agree with that. No, I think, like, again, I think all I talk to guys that are in very difficult situations in relationships, and people who have been married for a long time and having difficulties. And if there's one thing I've seen, is just that Jesus can do his work in people's lives. But at the same in the same moment, you have to say that both people have to be engaged in that relationship with Christ, because it takes two to tango. I mean, It takes both sides to be a part of it, and relationships don't work one way.
One of my best friends, but best man at my wedding, that kind of got me into Bible study and kind of really helped me turn things around. That was one thing that I really appreciate, and I sought after with him and his wife, because I knew how he was before. When he met his wife, it was a complete 180. And I was like, how does marriage work? They were married at the time, and I was newly engaged, so I had all those questions, and they were just like, it's not you, your wife, and then your kid. It's God's up here, you're down here, and it all works together. And I was like, okay. And the only way, and I'm like, I don't really feel like I know who God is or how all that works at the time, is like, and I asked him, I'm like, how do I know God better? And his wife interrupts and just grabs a Bible and holds it. She goes, it's right here. She's like, it's right here, just read it. And I'm like, Roger that works. Okay. So
no, I mean, if you really think about it, it really is completely of God. I look back on Kathy and I's relationship, and there were two harder moments, I would say, in our marriage. And I would say, looking back, I really do. I think God kept us together through all of it. It's not like we were thinking about divorce or anything, but just things were in a very not a good spot. And again, I totally agree with you that without the Lord being a part of all aspects of your relationship, it's very difficult to come together on anything. I mean, the reality is, just to a large degree, marriage is a mirror. So the person mirrors back to you kind of who you actually are. And that's disconcerting by definition, right? And so you're in a constant state where you're either having to grow up or get into tension with the other person. And marriage is definitely tough in that regard. And different marriages work different ways. Like, I call my marriage a little bit more on the higher maintenance side. This is Kathy and I talking too, just because our personalities we're both sort of stubborn and direct. And we're okay letting the other person know that. And so there's a constant sort of having to rethink through things and trying to dialogue. And again, I brought up the honesty. The honesty is the thing that helps us with that, so that we can not harbor anything and not be passive with each other.
Same with me and Jesse. Same the thing. Me and her both type A, kind of on it. How that manifests may be different, but again, I think you're right. Being honest and open and nothing's off the table. I mean, that makes it a lot easier. Problem with me is I may think about it a way, and if she doesn't say something back to me in a way that where I'm like, oh, okay, then we'll find ourselves talking in circles sometimes. She's like, I've said what how I felt about it like 4 different ways. And I'm like, sorry, it didn't click in here. Like, I just thought
Right.
But man, that's one thing I appreciate about the Ridge is there's marriage classes. There are so many resources there where basically any question that someone like myself or someone looking for that part of their life has, I think we're great. But I know you've got another meeting here soon, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but.
Well, shout out to the care department as well. So, I mean, they're obviously specialists in that, and they've got great premarital counseling and counseling just across the board.
Me and Jesse went to a new married couples session a couple times before church with Jason, who gave a great sermon yesterday. And dude, everybody does.
Haired without, haired within. The hair they could have been. It was very Dr.
Everybody's style is so different. Cool. Like Brad is Brad, and then you got Matt, Chris. Everybody's. Again, like, no matter the personality and the delivery, the message is always the same. It doesn't deviate off scripture. You're not adding or taking away things. It's great. But Brian, man, I appreciate it. I want to have you back on a couple more times. There's other topics I want to touch on. But dude, you're such a great, genuine guy. Like, I gravitate towards you, and that's not surprising because I hear that about a lot of different guys. But man, I'm blessed to know you and get to be, in close proximity with you and help other people grow, man. I can't thank you enough for the genuine friendship that you provide. And I'm happy to be a part of it all, man. I appreciate it.
Man. Well, vice versa. And I'm so happy to know you as well. And it's funny, again, back to the serendipity of all this and fate. Like, literally, you're at that precepts class that one morning.
You sat right
next to you. And if I hadn't done that, we wouldn't be doing this.
I feel like we might have. It would have
God's got his hand in all
but
things.
like, man, it was just like, hey, who are you? You know,
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy, Memphis, cool. I got this guy, yeah.
I love
And that's one thing. Like, I don't have to question genuineness in it church very often, but I'm like, there's a couple guys. I'm like, this guy's, he's got knowledge and he's got stuff that would make me a better person, and maybe vice versa. Like, there's that genuine relationship, and it's just like,
So
great. Man, I appreciate you. I'll let you go. I know you've got that board meeting coming up, so bless you in that regard. And man, like I said, I appreciate you, man. I really do. I like to let people know. So
man. Back at you, man. Love you, bro. Thank you for having me.
yeah, for
come
sure.
on for
I'll
the
have
ride
you on
here.
again soon. I'm really trying to kind of balance time between health and wellness and stuff, and all the sciencey stuff that I'm familiar with, and then the faith part. So having people on that are in it in the faith part is key. So I'm more than happy to have you back on again. I really appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Wellness Transcription Podcast. We hope you're inspired to live a healthier, more purpose-filled life in Christ. Remember, your well-being is a gift from God, and by taking care of your body, you give Him the glory. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you guys. Your continued support helps us spread this message of health and faith. Until next time, may God's grace and good choices guide your path to a life filled with joy, vitality, and a deeper connection with Jesus. God bless you all, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Your Space Coast vacation is preparing for liftoff. Start counting down now. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time for a beach vacay that feels like heaven. 6, 5, 4. Come explore Melbourne and the beaches. 3, 2, 1. It's time for some rocket-filled fun. Countdown to your best beach vacation ever on Florida's Space Coast. Launch your planning now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
Selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
As easy as pie?
Sure. All you have to do is enter your license plate or VIN.
As easy as a stroll in the park.
Okay, then just answer a few questions and you'll get a real offer in seconds.
As easy as singing.
Why not? Schedule a pickup or drop off and Carvana will pay you that amount right on the spot.
As easy as playing guitar.
Actually, I find that kind of difficult. But selling your car to Carvana is as easy as...
Can be.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get an instant offer today.